Just hours before the wedding, I discovered my husband in our living room with my son's fiancée. A movement in the corridor prevented me from confronting him. It was Elijah, my kid. He had a stone mask on his face. "Hello, everyone," he said in a whisper, after glancing at me. "Mom, I already know, and it's worse than you think. I appreciate you being with me today. Please let me know which city you're coming from before I begin my narrative. Please share it in the comments section. Let me now take you on a journey through this tale." I got up at 5 o'clock the morning of my son's wedding. I had trouble falling asleep. It was only jitters, I assured myself, the kind that any mother experiences on a day this significant. Here I was, sitting in my own home office, looking at spreadsheets on my computer. I operate a small home-based CPA practice. It wasn't particularly lavish, but it helped cover the frills that my husband Franklin's salary couldn't quite cover, and helped pay for our son Elijah's college education. The screen's numerals were a blur. I was thinking about something completely different. Even though it was still dark and quiet outside, I could already imagine the spectacle that would play out on our Atlanta, Georgia estate's patio in a few short hours. Perfect rows of white seats on the lawn. I had been working on the arch Franklin had constructed all spring, covering it with the rose bushes I had tended since they were little buds. I had personally examined the string lights 3 times to make sure there were no broken bulbs. It has to be flawless. Elijah, our son, deserved a wonderful day. 23 years of raising Elijah and 25 years of marriage to Franklin. My whole life had been devoted to this family. I had been the one to keep things organized, to remember birthdays and dental appointments, to make sure the bills were paid on time, and to be the steady hand. Everyone adored Franklin, who was the life of the party and the charmer. He relied on me as his basis, and for a while, it was sufficient for me. However, something had felt strange lately. A silent space had settled between us. He would pause his conversation when I entered a room. His phone was constantly angled away from me. He would just laugh it off when I asked if something was wrong. He would say, "Just work, honey. A big promotion is at stake." I decided to believe him. I mean, what else could I do? Because of a sentiment, you don't throw 25 years of history over the side. I returned to the present when the office door clicked. Elijah was there, still in his pajamas, holding a coffee mug. He had black circles under his eyes and appeared worn out. At his age, he inherited his father's good looks, but my pragmatic disposition. He remarked, "Mom, you've been up for hours. The wedding isn't until 4 o'clock. I tried to smile broadly as I shut down my laptop. "I just want everything to be perfect for my boy," I replied. "Your dad is still sleeping. He left early," Elijah remarked, his voice carrying an odd tone. He appeared somewhat younger when he approached and took a seat on the edge of my desk. He mentioned getting Madison's parents, the Ellingtons, a present. I scowled. I had never heard of that before. He hesitated and said, "Mom, may I ask you a question?" I swiveled in my seat to look at him. His concern was clear in the harsh glare of my desk lamp. "What are you thinking about, my love?" He inhaled deeply. "Is Madison truly in love with me?" The question was like a kick to the stomach. Madison, his fiancée, is a young architect from a wealthy, influential family who is also ambitious and attractive. She appeared to be all we had ever desired for Elijah. However, I had my own reservations. During family dinners, I had observed her occasionally averting her gaze while Elijah talked about his passions and checking her phone. "Why would you ask that, honey? It's your wedding day." "I know, and maybe it's just last-minute jitters," he muttered as he stared into his coffee. "But sometimes when she looks at me, I feel like she's looking right through me, like I'm just a box she needed to tick off on her way to the perfect life." He paused. "She has been spending a lot of time with her dad lately, and they're always talking about money and investments, and she claims he is mentoring her. I wanted to share with him what marriage is, the biggest step you'll ever take." "It's not just jitters, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking, and I stopped, my blood turning to ice. "I think she's in love with someone else." He finally glanced up at me, his eyes filled with an anguish that scared me. "She lights up when her father calls," he muttered. "Little things, how whenever she visits, she always starts by asking about him. Yesterday, I caught them chatting in the garden, as well as his gaze on her. It wasn't the proper way for a father-in-law to view his son's fiancée." My neck started to flush. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Elijah, that's a very serious accusation." "I know," he shrugged. Before I could respond, the door opened once more. "And I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong." Franklin was the one. He already had on a perfect shirt and dress slacks, and he looked as sharp as ever. He said, "Well, look at my two favorite people," with a smile that stopped short of his eyes. He seems taken aback by Elijah's presence. "Big day, son. You should be getting ready." He switched his focus to me. "And you, Simone, you're going to wear yourself out. Madison just called. She's coming by around 10 o'clock to discuss some last-minute seating chart details." I watched Elijah's expression tighten. "What specifics? You know how special her family is," he added. "Oh, just making sure her parents don't sit next to your Uncle James after that political argument last Christmas." Franklin waved dismissively. "We should discuss it privately because of the politics and all that." "Of course," Elijah said, his voice flat. "We can't have the wrong people sitting together." The tension in the room was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. I watched my husband and my son, and I knew deep in my soul that Elijah wasn't wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. After Franklin and Elijah left my office, a cold dread seized me. I was supposed to have a final call with the caterer at 10:30, a call I had been planning for weeks. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly, and called them. I told them I had a family emergency and needed to reschedule. It was a lie. The truth was, I had cleared my entire morning. I couldn't shake Elijah's words, nor the nauseating feeling that Franklin's false cheer had provoked. Something was happening in my house today, and for the first time in 25 years, I intended to find out what it was. I spent the next 2 hours pretending to be busy. I tidied the kitchen, which was already spotless. I rearranged the floral centerpieces on the dining room table. Every sound made me jump. Every passing car made my heart hammer against my ribs. I felt like an actress in a play performing the role of the happy mother of the groom, while inside, I twisted with anxiety. Exactly at 10 o'clock, a sleek white BMW pulled into our driveway, Madison's car. I watched from the kitchen window as she stepped out. Even in simple jeans and a blouse, she looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. She walked up to the front door with the natural confidence of someone who knows she belongs. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I crept out the back door and circled the house. Crouching low behind the large hydrangea bushes that bordered our living room windows, I felt ridiculous, like a spy in my own home. But the need to know, the need to confirm my fears or dispel them, was overwhelming. Through the large bay window, I could see them. Franklin had let her in, and they were standing by the fireplace, the spot where we took our family pictures every Christmas. He was pouring her a drink. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language said it all. They stood close, too close. His hand rested low on her back. It was a casual gesture, one that could be easily explained away, but it lingered there for a second too long. I clenched my hands into fists, my nails digging into my palms. 25 years we had built a life in this house. We had read stories to Elijah on that very sofa. We had hosted countless family parties in that room. And now my husband was standing there caressing another woman, my son's fiancée, on our son's wedding day. I was about to stand up to storm in like a fury and confront them right then and there. I didn't care about the scene. I didn't care about the wedding. I only cared about the scorching betrayal I was witnessing. But then I noticed movement in the upstairs hallway, a shadow in the glass's reflection. I looked closer. It was Elijah. He was standing at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, watching them. The sight of him, so still and broken, stopped me cold. This wasn't just my pain. It was his. Downstairs, things had escalated. Madison's hand was now on Franklin's chest. She leaned into him, her head tilted back, a smile playing on her lips. She said something and he laughed. It was a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Light, genuine, happy, the way he used to laugh with me when we were young, and everything seemed possible. In that moment, I saw my husband transform into someone I didn't recognize, someone alive, in a way he hadn't been with me for a long, long time. Then his hands were in her hair, and they were kissing. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss, the kind you see in movies. My vision went red. A roar filled my ears. I took a step toward the house, ready to rip the door from its hinges, ready to scream until my lungs gave out. And then a hand gripped my arm. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Elijah. He had slipped out of the house and come to find me. His face was pale, ashen, but his eyes burned with a cold, hard determination I had never seen before. "Mom, don't," he whispered, his voice strained. "Not yet, Elijah." I stumbled over the words. I was unable to utter it. He answered, "I know what it is. I could see his hands shaking, but his voice was calm. "I've known for weeks, Mom. Weeks." The words sounded like a choked whisper. My kid, whom I had reared, gazed at me with the eyes of a man who had witnessed too much. The hydrangeas still had us huddled behind them. The lovely flowers, of which I had been so pleased, were now being used as a cover for our family's demise. My husband and my son's fiancée had gone from the fireplace to the sofa inside the home. I was unable to look. Elijah remarked in a quiet, agitated voice. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I continued to justify them. "He's just trying to be kind. She's simply anxious about being a member of the family." But it continued. The way she lit up whenever he was around, the secret discussions, the lingering glances. He made the correction. The mistake served as a terrible reminder of a life that had ended. Instead of a rival, she was meant to receive a new mother figure. "I mean, why didn't you tell me, Madison?" My voice trembled with a mixture of surprise and an odd sense of protective wrath as I asked. "This shouldn't have been your burden." He clenched his jaw and muttered, "Because I needed proof." Additionally, his eyes were considerably older than his 23 years when he gazed at me. Providing them with enough rope to hang themselves was my goal. He took his phone out. He tapped the screen, his hands trembling a little. He admitted, "I hired someone." "What did you do?" "What, Mom? I'm not a moron. She told me it was an afternoon shopping trip with her pals. And the dad told me it was a business meeting after I caught them together for lunch a month ago." I was aware of my sanity. I had to be told the truth. He gave the phone to me. I engaged a private detective. My breath caught. "An investigator." "The money, Elijah," he added sadly. "Don't worry about the money. It was well worth the money." Franklin and Madison were seen entering the St. Regis Atlanta downtown, in the first image displayed on the TV. Franklin was allegedly at a regional sales conference on a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks prior. According to the Times, 2 hours later, they were seen departing together in the second picture, looking hot and unkempt. Elijah mutely remarked, "There are 17 different occasions," while I browsed a gallery of treachery. Pictures of them in dark eateries all throughout the city. Pictures showed them in a private parking lot, pressing up against Franklin's vehicle. Pictures of them having a totally other life behind our backs, smiling and holding hands. I was ill. The enormity of the deception was astounding. This was not an isolated error. It was a long-term, strategic affair. I stood up again. I felt a rush of anger come over me again. With a steely voice, I declared, "We're stopping this. Now." "No." Elijah's piercing voice caused me to squat once more. "Believe me, Mom, I've got a strategy." "Elijah, a plan. This is crazy. The wedding cannot merely be allowed." "Of course we can." With an authority I had never heard from him before, he interrupted, his voice ringing. "And we will consider it, Mom. What happens if we go up against them now? They will deny it. They will distort it. Dad will tell you that you're misinterpreting things and that you're being hysterical. Madison will pretend to be the victim and cry. They will turn everything against us." He was correct. Already, I could hear Franklin's slick, accommodative voice. "You're overreacting, Simone. I was merely giving her some fatherly advice, and she's a timid young lady." "What then would you recommend?" I muttered as a chilly, horrifying clarity replaced my rage. There was something strange and icy about Elijah's smile. He said, "Public humiliation," the words lingering between us. "Their reputations are completely and utterly destroyed. Legal repercussions. Mom, we don't just stop here. We ensure that they will never be able to harm anyone again." I turned to face my son. When had he grown so cunning, so vicious? I then turned to face the window and looked back. I watched as my husband, whom I had trusted and loved for 25 years, began unbuttoning Madison's blouse on the sofa where our family had been established. I realized then that I was no longer the patient, understanding wife I had once been. In the ground behind the flowers I had so laboriously sown, she had passed away. I said, "Tell me the plan." It was one of the most peculiar nights of my life. Franklin asked about final catering arrangements when he returned home, pretending nothing had happened. Madison was the epitome of the devoted husband and proud father who had departed hours before. He discussed his remarks at the reception and expressed his pride in Elijah. I was having trouble breathing because of the hypocrisy. I screamed within, but I just nodded and grinned, a hollow shell of who I was. I met Elijah in my home office after Franklin had gone to bed. The blinds were drawn and the door was locked. In many respects, it was a war room, and it felt that way. The beginnings of an evidence file that would make a prosecutor cry with delight were on my desk. "Tell me about that detective," I asked. looking at an unsettling surveillance shot. Her name is Aisha, introduced Elijah. The name, Asha Whitfield, came as a shock to my system. Aisha, my sister. Aisha. Elijah gave a nod. I had no idea who else I should call. She worked as a police officer for 20 years before retiring and launching her own private investigation firm. I knew she would be discreet and intelligent. He appeared somewhat sheepish. I was also aware that she had never been fond of Dad. I laughed sharply and briefly, but it sounded more like a sob. Aisha, my younger sister. Although we were close, I had kept the developing distance with Franklin a secret from her. I hadn't acknowledged that my marriage might be crumbling because I was too proud and ashamed. I said, I'll call her, in an emotionally charged voice. Simone, it's past midnight. Is everything okay? Aisha replied on the second ring. No, Aisha, nothing is okay. Then the dam broke. I told her everything, what we saw that morning, what Elijah suspected, and the pictures. I let out my first, ugly, strangled sobs of the day. On the other end of the queue, she spoke calmly and firmly while listening intently. There was only a somber acceptance, neither surprise nor astonishment. She said, I'm not surprised, Simone. Once I was done, Elijah informed me about the pictures, and I wiped my eyes and replied, I've seen the way he looks at that girl. I was hoping I was wrong. Do you have anything else? More than you're likely interested in knowing. Her tone became formal. For 3 weeks, I have been following their whereabouts. Like clockwork, they get together at the St. Regis Atlanta twice a week. He constantly makes cash payments. He would never take you to the upscale restaurants where they eat lunch. He took her to Cardia last week. I was filled with anger once more. Our funds. The funds I meticulously handled. The funds that were intended for our future in retirement. Aisha's voice was quiet. Simone. Now, there's more. Something bigger. I've been looking into Franklin's finances to see where all of the money for the presents and hotel rooms is coming from. He has been careless. I feared the response as I inquired, what did you find? The queue paused for a long moment. She said, it's not just Madison, in a somber voice. This is not the first instance. For 15 years, I discovered a string of consistent monthly payments made to the same individual, Nicole Jenkins. I didn't understand the name. Who is she? I performed some research. When Elijah was a child, she worked as a junior associate at his previous firm. About 15 years ago, she went without warning. A few months after her departure, the payment began. Aisha inhaled deeply. Simone, Zoe, her 15-year-old daughter, is her child. I did a background investigation. Although the birth certificate doesn't name the father, I'm willing to wager that Franklin is her biological father. In my hand, the phone felt weighty. I was having trouble breathing. A daughter, an entire other child, 15 years of deceit, 15 years of a double life. It all became horribly clear. The covert travel, the unexplained costs, the emotional detachment. I murmured, I must know for sure, Aisha. I understand, she said. I'll take care of it. But you need to be ready, Simone. This is going to drop like a nuclear bomb. I know, I responded in a harsh, icy tone. That is precisely what we are relying on. A haze of deliberate deceit filled the 24 hours before the wedding. With my head racing and my body operating on autopilot, I made the preparations like a ghost. I grinned at family members. Together with the wedding planner, I gave my approval to the final table arrangements. I even assisted Franklin with his tie, imagining how to tighten it around his neck as my fingers brushed the silk cloth. Every conversation was a show, and every kind word was a fake. Aisha worked rapidly. This had become personal for her, who worked as a professional. She informed me that she knew someone at a private laboratory. Although it's dangerous, Simone, we can obtain a preliminary, non-legal comparison to a sample from the girl if we can obtain a clean DNA sample from Franklin. I slipped out of the room that night after Franklin had gone to sleep. Snoring quietly next to me in the bed we had slept in for 25 years. Every creak of the floorboard made my heart race. I grabbed his toothbrush out of its holder and headed to the restroom. I nearly dropped my hand because it was shaking so much. It seemed like the worst kind of transgression. What, however, was this in comparison to the transgressions he had perpetrated against our family and against me? I placed it in the mailbox for Aisha to pick up before daybreak after carefully placing it in a plastic bag. Aisha called the following day as the house was a flurry of activity from photographers and flowers. I'm more accurate, she added in a somber tone. We underestimated the severity. The only place I felt comfortable talking was in my car, which was parked on the street and far from the home. She turned a laptop towards me after opening it. A spreadsheet with a bewildering array of dates and figures was displayed on the screen. She pointed to a highlighted column and added, "I did a full analysis of your joint accounts, your retirement funds, everything. Examine the pattern. Franklin has been regularly withdrawing tiny sums of money, 500 here, 700 there, never more than 1,000 at a time from various banks for years." Stunned, I answered, "I assumed it was for his hobbies." He consistently informed me that he was making cash transactions because he was investing in rare coins. One more untruth. His pastime was called Madison, Aisha remarked sourly. The money for the gifts, the pricey dinners, the hotel rooms, and the Cartier necklace. The worst part is that he paid for half of it with cash. She selected a different tab. "He has been using your pension plan as collateral for debts." I gazed at the display. It was in black and white there. A number of loans deducted from the retirement fund that I had so assiduously built up through my modest business, the account that was meant to serve as our retirement security and safety net. In the previous 18 months, he had spent about $60,000. How? He would have required my signature, I muttered. "He forged it," Aisha said. "I contrasted your signature on your tax returns with the one on the loan agreements. It's not yours, but it's a good forgery." I felt a wave of nausea. This was more than dishonest. It was theft. My heart wasn't the only thing he was breaking. In order to finance his sordid affair, he was methodically destroying our future, piece by piece. He was depriving me of the life we were meant to lead together and the college fund we had established. He was risking my whole future. Madison, too. My voice was hardly heard as I asked, with a fixed gaze. Aisha stated, "She's not an innocent victim. There's something else first, but I'll get to her." She paused. She then gave me a big envelope made of manila. "This morning, the initial DNA results were received." I opened it with trembling hands. I skimmed the paper until I reached the conclusion at the bottom of the page. The scientific language became hazy. 99.999% is the probability of paternity. I gazed at the words until I could no longer remember them. Franklin's daughter was named Zoe Jenkins. 15 years. They built a life with him, loved him, and trusted him for 15 years while he had another daughter and another family living in the background. My head was resting on the steering wheel, my feverish forehead against the cool leather. I refrained from crying. I couldn't stop crying. I felt a strange, frightful calmness. The agony persisted, a huge, open wound in my chest. But now there was another problem with it, a strong, frigid resolve. He would not simply lose his wife. Everything would be lost for him. That thin piece of paper felt like a gravestone in my hand as my sister and I sat in the van. It was my marriage's death certificate and the end of the life I believed I had. A daughter who was 15 years old. The automobile was silent as the words reverberated. I managed to exclaim, How did you find her?" in a voice that sounded weird and distant to me. Aisha's face was a mixture of professional resolution and sympathy. "The payments were the first thing. I once knew the name of Nicole Jenkins. It was easy to find her. She's only 2 towns away." Simone was around 20 meters away. 20 meters? He had been leading a covert life, a short drive away for 15 years. How often had he informed me that he was working late? How many dinners for business had he been to? How many times had he gone golfing on the weekends? I went over years of falsehoods and excuses in my head, and it was spinning. Now, each is assuming a new, sinister meaning. "The house caught my eye yesterday morning," Aisha went on in a quiet voice. "I pretended to be a market analyst. When Nicole answered the door, I noticed Zoe, the girl, standing behind her. Simone. She resembles him exactly. I was drawn to him all those years ago by his dark, perceptive eyes. The same grin. You can't miss her." I had a vision of it. In all of this, there was a naive youngster who resembled my spouse. My son had a sister he was unaware of. I was unable to finish processing the concept since it was so bizarre and horrible. My family wasn't simply dysfunctional. It was a meticulously crafted fake, a hoax, and I had unwittingly contributed to its upkeep for over half of my life. "Is Nicole, my mother, aware of me?" "What about Elijah?" I inquired. "I'm not positive," Aisha said. "She has a great home and a decent school system, but her lackluster profession makes it obvious that Franklin is her main source of income. She has good reason to remain silent." "Simone, he wasn't simply paying child support. He used my money, our money, my consulting money, our joint savings, and the money he embezzled from our retirement to support her throughout her entire life." The treachery was so complex and profound. I thought I was going to drown. It was a methodical theft of my future, my trust, and my life's labor. I gave Aisha back the DNA report. Put it with the rest of the evidence, I replied. My voice was emotionless and numb. Because the shock was so severe, I was unable to experience anything other than a heavy, frigid emptiness. I was thinking about Zoe. That girl. What sort of man would deny his daughter recognition? What sort of father brings up one son in the spotlight while concealing another child in the shadows? It was incredible how vicious this young girl was, not just to Elijah and myself. I had to change my attention in order to find a target for the rage that was beginning to seep into my veins, so I asked, "And what about Madison? You said there was more on her." Aisha nodded, her expression hardening again. "Right, Madison. Let's talk about the fiancé." She turned the laptop back to me and opened a new file. "She's not just sleeping with your husband. She's been embezzling funds from her law firm." The words took a moment to register. "She's a junior partner at a prestigious downtown firm," Aisha explained, displaying documents that looked like internal financial reports. "She's been inflating expense reports, creating fake invoices for non-existent consultants, and siphoning the money into a private bank account. They aren't large amounts each time, but it's steady. In the last year, she's stolen over $200,000. I gasped. 200,000. And I can trace some of that money directly to gifts for Franklin. A screenshot of the transaction, a statement from her credit card showing $1,000 watch to buy presents for her lover, who was taking from his wife to buy presents for her. She was robbing her partners. I've never seen such a wonderfully repulsive circle of dishonesty. Madison was more than just a homewrecker. Then, she was a thief and a criminal who was going to marry my son, bringing her deceit and corruption into the remaining members of my family. My chest's numbness disappeared, to be replaced by a white-hot rage. Now, it was more than simply a broken heart. I did this to keep my son safe. Justice was at issue here. This was about ensuring that these two individuals were held accountable for every money, every lie, and every broken promise. "All right," I murmured, meeting my sister's gaze. "The wedding schedule. We should review it again. It must be flawless." The already breathtaking betrayal took on a sinister, criminal undertone when Madison's theft was discovered. Everything altered as a result. This was no longer merely a tragic, messy domestic story. The two individuals who ought to have been closest to us were involved in a scheme of theft and deception. "How did all of this come to you?" Pointing to the damning financial data on her laptop screen, I asked Aisha. The stench of stale coffee and conspiracy permeated the air as we remained in my car. With grim satisfaction, Aisha remarked, "Madison isn't as smart as she thinks. She became reckless." Additionally, after hearing the incident, some of my friends who work in law enforcement were eager to pull some strings. After just one glance at these patterns, a friend of mine on the economic crimes team realized exactly what he was seeing. She gestured towards the screen. Using her mother's maiden name, she created a shell corporation to transfer the funds. It was amateur. The Ellingtons, Madison's parents, came to mind. They served as the community's cornerstones. A well-respected federal judge was her father. Her mother served on the boards of 3 charitable organizations. In their social circles, reputation was crucial. They thought their daughter was a rising star who would marry into a stable, decent household. The stable family she was marrying into was a house of cards based on lies, and they were unaware that their golden girl was a robber. They were also going to be destroyed by the public disgrace. There was a brief moment when I felt sorry for them. The fire of my own treachery swiftly put out that feeling, even though they were innocent collateral damage. I summarized, the words tasting like venom. "So Franklin is stealing our retirement money to buy gifts for his mistress. Madison is also embezzling money from her business to purchase presents for my husband, her lover, and her future father." I shook my head, not believing it. "This is movie material." With a retwist to her lips, Aisha replied, "It gets better. Madison suggested that Franklin spend some of the money he had taken out of your pension plan in a surefire real estate venture. Let me guess," I remarked in a sarcastic tone. The transaction failed. Aisha verified that the deal never happened. The funds were immediately deposited into her confidential account. She was also robbing him. He never even noticed it since he was so consumed by his own ego and infatuation. I had to chuckle. The tone was devoid of joy and bitterness. An embezzler in his 20s was defrauding my clever, charming husband, who always believed he was the smartest person in the room. It was almost poetry. We reviewed the evidence that Aisha had gathered for an additional hour. She had it all: faked loan documents, cash-paid hotel receipts, surveillance footage, bank statements, and now a complete criminal file on Madison's actions that was prepared to be given to the prosecutor. Of course, there was also the DNA report, the indisputable evidence that solidified 15 years of dishonesty. I examined the file, its tidy tabs and well-structured pages, which symbolized the whole dismantling of my life. 25 years of marriage were reduced to a pile of damning papers on my car's passenger seat. I was suddenly overcome with fatigue. It was so intense that it was like a physical burden on my chest. I muttered, "Aisha, can we do this?" Aisha put her hand on my arm and asked, "Can we really stand up in front of 300 people and do this to our family?" Her hold was secure and comforting. "Simone, pay attention to me," she said gravely. "What other option do you have? If you confront them in private, they will lie. They will manipulate you. They will turn Elijah against you. They will deny until you start thinking you're the crazy one. I've seen it 100 times." She was correct. I was aware of her correctness. Manipulation was Franklin's forte. He could get out of everything by charm. "In this manner," she continued, "there is no escape. There is no room for lies. There is only the truth presented in front of everyone they tried to impress. This isn't just about revenge, Simone, it's about consequences. Madison has to face jail time. Franklin has to be held accountable, not just for the cheating, but for the financial fraud he committed against you. This is the only way to make sure the lies stop forever." I exhaled deeply, the musty smell of the vehicle filling my lungs. Elijah's sallow, resolute face came to mind. The daughter I never met, Zoe, sprang to mind. I reflected on the 25 years I had spent with a man who had been deceiving me from the start. "You're right," I stated once more in a forceful and clear voice. "There is no other option." I got the car started. "Come on, we need to get ready for a wedding." The most strange moments of my life were in the final hours before the wedding. I returned home and went back to being the groom's contented, serene mother. As though I were viewing a film about my own life, I experienced an odd sense of detachment. I could see myself telling the caterer that everything looked amazing, giggling with my cousins, and praising my sister-in-law's attire. On the exterior, I was a picture of maternal pride, but on the inside, I was a coil of stress and sorrow. Franklin was having a great time, mingling with the early arriving guests and grinning broadly and confidently as he accepted congratulations. At one point, he put his arm around my waist and dragged me away. He murmured softly in my ear, "You look beautiful, Simone." I felt nothing except icy, bleak emptiness as I gazed into the eyes of the guy I had loved for over half of my life. "Isn't it a perfect day?" I returned the smile. It was a perfect day. Elijah, my son, was a reflection of my own imposed poise. He performed his part flawlessly, greeted his friends, and posed for pictures with his groomsmen, but I could see the same steel resolve mirrored in his eyes every time they met mine across the packed grounds. Together, we were in this. As troops, we awaited the signal to fire. Aisha had practiced the strategy with us until we knew it by heart, and it was straightforward. Disguised as a member of the catering crew, she had arrived early. Despite being in plain sight, her professional audiovisual equipment was concealed, presumably for a nostalgic slideshow of Elijah's infant photos. She had linked her laptop to the big projection screen we had rented. Nobody had any suspicions. In her pocket was a tiny remote control. She only needed to press one button when the time arrived. I had a role of my own. Even Elijah was unaware that I had worked with my lawyer to prepare the divorce documents a week earlier. I kept them in a sealed envelope in my clutch purse, signed and notarized. I also had copies of all the evidence that Asa had collected on a flash drive. Today would be the official end of my marriage, one way or another. There was no turning back. I had more in mind than a simple altercation. The first day of the rest of my life was something I was organizing. I sat down in the first row at 4:05. The wedding party arrived as the string quartet started to play. Franklin sat next to me and squeezed my hand in what seemed like real love. Even though I was trembling with disgust, I forced myself not to recoil. A vision in white lace, Madison emerged at the end of the aisle. She was gorgeous, dazzling, and completely fake. She gave the audience a smile. Then she noticed Franklin sitting in the front row. They looked at each other for a moment, a glimpse of triumphant conspiracy, of shared secrets. They believed they had triumphed. They believed they were only a few minutes away from securing their ideal, dishonest future. With his face hidden behind an inscrutable mask, Elijah stood at the altar. He held Madison's hand as she joined him. His face remained unwavering. His gaze swept over the faces in the crowd before settling on mine. He nodded once, almost perceptibly. The time had come. With the customary remarks about love, loyalty, and dedication, the officiant opened the ceremony. The irony was almost oppressive in its density. I pondered whether Madison and Franklin were already organizing their next covert meeting, or if they were even paying attention. The ceremony went on. They made promises they had already broken 100 times, and exchanged unintended vows. Every time they told a falsehood, my stomach turned. The crucial moment was finally reached by the officer. He gave the throng a kind smile. "Please speak up now or eternally remain silent if you have any arguments against these two being married in a sacred ceremony." Among the 300 guests, there was stillness. Now was the time. I believed my heart may burst through the pressure it was exerting on my ribcage. I sensed that everyone was watching us. I inhaled deeply and slowly. Then, I got to my feet. A collective gasp went through the 300 visitors. As soon as I stood up, after being filled with the pleasant afternoon wind and the gentle melodies of the string quartet, the air abruptly went quiet and dense. The entire garden turned to face me. Like a physical force, I could sense their bewilderment, disbelief, and interest. Franklin, who was seated beside me, became rigid. He grabbed my arm and hissed, "Simone, what are you doing? Take a seat. You're creating a commotion." As though it were a poisonous serpent, I shook his hand off. I ignored him and focused on my son Elijah, who was standing at the altar with a determined yet pale expression. He anticipated this. It was something we had planned. I turned to face Madison, whose bright smile had turned into a mask of bewildered fear. I said, "I'm sorry, everyone," in a clear and surprisingly steady voice. It reverberated throughout the quiet garden. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think the officer inquired as to whether there was any reason why this marriage shouldn't go forward." I took a moment to let the impact of what I had said sink in. "Indeed, I do. I have a motive." There was a surge of whispering among the people. I watched Judge Ellington, Madison's father, start to get up from his chair with a look of thunderous outrage on his face. "What does this mean, Mrs. Whitfield?" He gave a loud roar. "The message is that your daughter is about to marry my son under false pretenses, Judge Ellington, and I think you and everyone here present should know the truth," I replied, turning to face him. I retrieved the little remote control from my purse. It was the one I got from Aisha. I kept my thumb over the one red button. The reality. Franklin's cheeks turned scarlet as he sputtered. "You've gone crazy, Simone. Our son is being embarrassed by you." "Am I, Franklin?" I asked coolly, returning my attention to him as my voice fell to a frozen silence. "Our son has been embarrassed by you and your mistress." With that, I pressed the button. The big screen behind the altar that was meant to display a slideshow of Elijah's newborn pictures suddenly came to life. A clear CCTV photo of Franklin and Madison sharing that passionate kiss in our living room was the first thing that came up. The same one that Elijah and I had seen the day before. The audience burst out. People were getting up to get a closer look, screaming and gasping. I watched Madison's mother, with a pale face, put a palm to her chest. "But that's not all," I added, somehow breaking through the commotion with my voice. "This wasn't a one-time error. You see, months have passed since this began." The screen was altered. A fresh image surfaced. Madison and Franklin arriving at the St. Regis Atlanta. It is easy to see the times. Then one more, and one more. A collage of their covert meetings, their covert lunches, and their lies made public. Madison tried to refute it, but the commotion drowned out her voice as she stammered. "Am I, Franklin?" I whispered as Franklin stood there yelling, "This is fake. Those are photo montages. Simone is having a nervous breakdown." Again, the screen changed, saying, "Then perhaps you can explain this." This time it displayed bank statements. My finger on a close-up photo pointed out the suspicious cash withdrawals, the forged signatures on the pension plan loan documents. A Cartier receipt for a $15,000 necklace flashed on the screen, followed by a photo of Madison wearing that same necklace at her bachelorette party. The noise from the crowd began to diminish, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. This was no longer just a cheating scandal. It was something darker. "My husband has been systematically stealing from our family's retirement savings to fund his affair," I announced. "And his fiancée, the woman about to marry my son, has also been busy." The next slide showed the evidence of Madison's embezzlement from her law firm. the fake invoices, the bank transfers. I could see her partners in the fourth row, their faces shifting from confusion to pure fury. And then I delivered the final devastating blow. "But the best part," I said, my voice turning to ice. "The true heart of the deceit that has defined my marriage is that my husband's lies didn't start with Madison." The DNA test results filled the screen. The words, "probability of paternity, 99.999%, were displayed in huge bold letters. Below, there was a photo of a pretty, smiling 15-year-old girl. "This is Zoe Jenkins," I said, my voice trembling with 15 years of repressed pain. "She is Franklin's daughter, a daughter he has kept hidden from me and his own son for her entire life." The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people staring at the evidence of a betrayal so complete, so devastating that even the most seasoned gossips were left speechless. And in that perfect, terrible silence, I watched the world I had known for 25 years burn to the ground. The silence was broken by a single sharp sob. It came from Madison, who staggered, her face a ghastly white against the pure white of her wedding dress. Then she collapsed onto the ground in a heap of lace and shattered dreams. That single sound broke the spell. The garden erupted into chaos. People were yelling, pointing, pulling out their phones to record the disaster. Madison's mother ran toward her fallen daughter, while her father, the judge, stood there, his face a mask of disbelief and utter humiliation. Franklin froze for a moment, his face a kaleidoscope of rage, panic, and mounting horror. He looked from the screen to me, to the stunned faces of his friends and colleagues. He was trapped. There were no lies, no smooth words that could talk his way out of this. His carefully constructed world had been publicly and irrevocably demolished. Then he did the only thing a coward could do. He ran. He bolted, shoving his way through the stunned crowd, knocking over a tray of champagne glasses as he scrambled toward the parking area. He was literally trying to flee the scene of his own life's implosion. But Aisha was waiting for him. My sister, still in her catering uniform, stepped out from behind a large oak tree bordering our property. She was a petite woman, but she moved with the confidence of a seasoned police officer. As Franklin ran past, she put out her foot. It was a perfectly executed trip. Franklin fell hard, hitting the manicured lawn and sliding for a few feet in his expensive wedding suit. "Going somewhere, Franklin. You planned this," she cried in a hysterical voice. "You planned this whole thing to ruin my life." "No, Madison," Elijah said, his voice clear and cold, cutting through her hysterics. "You ruined your own life," Aisha asked casually as she walked over to where he lay sprawled and gasping. By that time, Elijah had left the altar and was standing next to me. He put a firm arm around me. "You and him," he gestured towards his father, who is now being helped up by Aisha. "Let go of me," Franklin demanded, trying to pull his arm free from my sister's firm grasp. "Can't do that, Frankie," Aisha said, using a childhood nickname that made him flinch. "You see, I'm a licensed private investigator, and I have reason to believe you have committed multiple felonies, including financial fraud. But don't worry, we're not here to talk about you right now." She looked over her shoulder. "My business is with her." Two uniformed police officers were walking calmly through the parting crowd. They weren't here for Franklin's fraud. That would be a civil matter for my lawyer to handle. They were here for Madison Ellington. One of the officers asked, his voice quiet but authoritative. Madison's eyes went wide with terror. "No," she whispered. "You are under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud." The officer continued as his partner took her arms and gently applied the handcuffs. The click of the cuffs closing was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I saw Madison's face crumble as the realization hit her that this was not just public humiliation. This was not just a cancelled wedding. This was real. There were going to be real legal consequences. Her life, as she knew it, was over. As the police led a sobbing Madison away, her parents watched in stunned horror. The photographers who had been hired to capture a fairy tale were now capturing the fall of a prominent family, their flashes popping relentlessly. The crowd began to disperse. Some left quickly, not wanting to be a part of the disaster. Others lingered, whispering in shocked huddles, their phones still held high, recording everything. In the midst of the chaos, I finally felt my strength leave me. Elijah held me. "It's over, Mom," he whispered. I gazed around at the remains of the ideal day I had planned and thought, "It's finally over." It was a complete disaster. It was a bad dream. However, I felt as like I could finally breathe for the first time in months. Would you kindly hit the like button on this video and leave the first remark below? If you're still watching, it lets me know you're here with me on this trip and that you've been there for me. I am greatly encouraged by your support. Let me explain what transpired after you leave a comment on the first one. Flashing blue lights, whispered talks, and the slow, agonizing process of disassembling a wedding that never was were all part of the 3 hours that followed the explosion. Our statements were taken by the police. In the strong brightness of the setting sun, Madison's exquisite wedding gown appeared tragic and ridiculous as she was driven away in a patrol car. After being interrogated and let free, Franklin just vanished. Without saying anything to his son or to me, he got into his car and drove off. Elijah questioned, a glimmer of the previous warmth returning to his gaze. "And you?" "I don't know yet," was my honest response. "I think I'm just numb." The following weeks were a nasty, agonizing experience. Naturally, the tale went viral in the local media. The groom's father was linked to decades of dishonesty. The fiancé was arrested at the altar, and there was a wedding day scandal. Our faces and identities were all over the place. I ceased taking phone calls. I stopped going out of the house unless it was absolutely required. My tiny CPA practice suffered. Uncomfortable with the publicity, a few loyal customers discreetly moved their business elsewhere. I followed my plan to the letter the day after the wedding, with the signed divorce papers and the flash drive of supporting documentation in my purse. I entered my lawyer's office and filed. Franklin didn't even try to contend with the quantity of evidence we had. The court system was harsh and quick. In exchange for his defrauding our retirement savings, I received the house and a sizable amount of his remaining assets in the settlement. It was not a win. It was reparation. Madison accepted a plea bargain in the face of overwhelming evidence. She was ordered to repay all of the cents she had stolen and given a 2-year sentence in a low-security prison. The reputation of her family was destroyed. Though not as full, Franklin's descent was more subdued. He lost his respect from everyone he knew, his work, and his reputation. I heard that he rarely showed his face in public after moving into a tiny flat across town. However, Zoe was the most complex aspect of the fallout. I got a letter 2 weeks after the wedding. It came from Zoe's mother, Nicole Jenkins. It was succinct and direct. She stated her daughter Zoe had learnt the truth from the news and wanted to meet Elijah and me, and she expressed regret for the hurt her previous connection with Franklin had caused. For 3 days, I sat with that letter. What should I have done? My husband's greatest betrayal was embodied in this girl. She was innocent though. None of this was her request. She was the sister of my son. I showed Elijah the letter. His countenance was stern as he read it. He said right away, "I want to meet her." "Mom, she's my sister. She has a right to know her family, or what remains of them." I decided to call. We decided to meet at a peaceful coffee shop in a town that was midway between ours as a neutral venue. I was afraid. I twisted the serviette in my hands till it was a ragged mess while we waited for them to come. Then they entered. Nicole was a typical, weary-looking woman who appeared to be carrying the burden of her secrets on her sagging shoulders. Zoe was behind her. My breath caught when I saw her. Aisha was correct. The same dark, perceptive eyes that had won me over to Franklin all those years ago were in her. She held a book like a shield to her chest and appeared frightened and unsure. I realized then that I wasn't angry with the innocent girl who was the victim of all of this. He always had it with him. It felt awkward to meet Zoe for the first time. Words were awkward and insufficient. The most of the conversation was done by Elijah. Bless him. He inquired about her life, the book she was holding, and high school. Regarding Franklin, he made no inquiry. He just regarded her as a person, like if she were a sister he had just met. For the most part, I just stared, attempting to make sense of the enormous deception this shy, kind child represented. Tensely and slowly, we started to construct something new. After lunch, we reconnected for coffee. After Elijah and Zoe began messaging, they found that they both like spicy food and old movies. I started anticipating visiting her and learning about her life. She was nice, witty, and intelligent. She was a helpless person entangled in the chaos our parents had created. A year went by. There was a new, strange rhythm to life. The divorce was finalized. The media frenzy died down and was replaced by more recent scandals. My clients began to return gradually as I put all of my focus into restoring my company. I bought a smaller, easier to manage townhouse for myself and sold the big family house with its haunted garden. It was mine, and it was calm and serene. Elijah was doing well following months of therapy to deal with the stress of the betrayal. In order to follow his genuine passion, landscape architecture, He had quit his corporate career and returned to school as an appropriate metaphor for what he was doing with his own life. He was making beautiful spaces and using stone and soil to create order and beauty. He was in a relationship with a beautiful young woman, a sincere and compassionate librarian who treated him as though he were the only person in the world. Furthermore, Zoe had assimilated into our lives. Every other Sunday, she came over for dinner. Through hours of conversation and teasing, she and Elijah had formed a true sibling bond. I discovered that I loved her fiercely and protectively. She no longer represented treachery. She was only my son's sister Zoe, and somehow, she was a member of my family. I was sitting in my new home's living room one evening, approximately a year after the wedding that wasn't, when the doorbell rang. Franklin was the one. He had left our damaged reception the day before, and I hadn't seen or spoken to him since. He appeared smaller, older, grayer, and his self-assured haughtiness had given way to a profound exhaustion. He requested permission to enter. I paused. Then I moved to the side. I heard that he was receiving therapy. He claimed that he was attempting to ascertain the reasons behind his actions. He said he was sorry. He expressed regret for the hurt he had brought to Elijah, Zoe, and myself, as well as for the lies and betrayal. I could see he meant it when I listened. However, 25 years of dishonesty couldn't be undone by an apology. I said, "I forgive you, Franklin." I was shocked to discover that I truly meant it. For me, not for you. I can no longer bear such rage. It weighs too much. I made eye contact with him, but I will never again put my trust in you. We are unable to return. With tears in his eyes, he nodded. He said, "I know," and walked away. As I prepared for bed that evening, I couldn't help but think of the lady I was a year ago, squatting in the dirt behind the hydrangeas. She was so lost, so broken. I hoped I could go back in time and reassure her that the suffering was only the beginning. The family I believed to be mine was a fiction. That beautiful afternoon, it broke into a million pieces. But in its stead, Elijah, Zoe, and I constructed something smaller, quieter, and less flawless. However, it was truthful. It was based on a challenging, agonizing, and ultimately liberating truth, rather than cozy lies. Even though we had lost everything, we had discovered something genuine, and that felt like enough for the first time in a very long time. Thank you. I appreciate you hearing my tale. Please feel free to leave a remark if you have experienced something similar, or if any of this has struck a chord with you. Your tales are important. Please think about enjoying this video and subscribing to the channel if you want to hear more. Treat yourself with kindness, and I'll see you later.